Hello, grammar and writing students, and welcome to our verbals and phrases used as adverbs. So just a couple of reminders before we go jumping into this. Just remember your adverbs are generally modifying another adverb or a verb or an adjective. And we are going to talk a little bit about the verbals and just remind ourselves of those, but just remember that your adverbs are hanging out with verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Your adjectives hang out with nouns. Now let's talk a little bit and remind ourselves what a verbal is. And we have looked at these several times this year. And a verbal is, I always describe it as a word that used to be a verb. Notice V-E-R-B in verbal. It used to be a verb. But now it is living another life as a noun, but it needs help to get there. And so if you take verb and you add ing to it, a verb, and you add ing to it, you would get a gerund. That is one kind of verbal. And so the word singing happily makes me happy. We're going to look at some examples in just a second. The infinitive, we take to and add to a verb, so to sing. So now that we've had this little get the cobwebs out, remind ourselves what verbs are, let's take a look at a couple of examples, what verbals are. So here's some sentences with them in there. So the first one has the infinitive. To sing happily is my favorite pastime. Or singing happily is my favorite pastime. Both to sing happily and singing happily are phrases. And so they include words, but remember, a phrase will not have a subject and a verb. And so just the little smidgen of words that's there creates a phrase. All right, let's take a look. We are going to be, if you are in the 8th grade book, we are on page 472. So you can turn there. We're going to take a look at the gray box in just a second. But first, I want to go through 5 different points about how phrases can be used. Then we're going to review the gray box, and then we'll look at some examples so you know what to expect. So the first thing, prepositional phrases can be used as an adverb and can modify a verb or a verbal. It usually tells how, when, where, or why. So prepositional phrases, we need to think about what a preposition is, and we're actually going to be studying those shortly, but a lot of you know them from your earlier grammar days. A lot of prepositions tell us a location: over, under, around, about, between, and there are, I don't know, probably 100 different prepositions. Some of the grammar jingles that we've learned have 49, 50, 51, 52. So there's a lot of prepositions out there. And if you have not already put some sort of list in your grammar notebook, then you may want to do that. So here's an example. Julie ran around the barn before coming home. So around the barn tells us where Julie ran. So we're looking at the verb. There's the verb, ran. And it tells us where. And so if you remember up here, where, when, where, or why. All right, point number 2, prepositional phrase used as an adverb can modify an adjective or an adverb by telling to what degree, how, or how much. And this one's not included on there. I had trouble thinking of an example, but prepositional phrase used as an adverb can modify an adjective. And so I walked through the fields by the brook. So by the brook tells us where, that's an adverb, but it is telling us which fields, and so it's modifying fields. Our next one is that several prepositional phrases in succession, that means in a row, may be all adverbs, each modifying the same word. So let's look at this example. Jesus walked through the fields on the Sabbath. What's the verb? Walked. So then we find out he walked where and when. Both of those are adverb questions that we can answer. All right, a prepositional phrase used as an adverb may contain a prepositional phrase used as an adjective. And this is where it starts to get really confusing. So Jesus was displeased with activities. Now here's where. So where was he displeased with these activities? In the court of the temple. So that's this first part. Prepositional phrase used as an adverb may also contain a prepositional phrase used as an adjective. So let's hop down here and look at this. In the court of the temple. Well, of the temple is modifying court. It's a specific court, a specific place. Like if I said go to the bedroom upstairs, it's telling me more about which court I want. So these can be really tricky. So be careful. Look at all of your prepositional phrases. And my third graders will tell you you can put as many prepositional phrases in a sentence as you want. And so sometimes there's a whole string of them. And you have to kind of sort out what they're modifying. And number 5, an infinitive or infinitive phrase can be used as an adverb. We study the Bible to know the truth. To know is an infinitive phrase. Now, you might be saying, well, how do I know if to know is an infinitive phrase or a prepositional phrase? Well, a prepositional phrase will end with a noun. An infinitive phrase will end with a verb. So to know is a verb. And so that is how we know it's an infinitive phrase. So make sure you know that difference and that you can clarify. And so we study the Bible. Why? And here's where it becomes that adverb. Why? To know the truth. All right, now that we have reviewed some pretty important points, let's take a look quickly at the gray box. If you look on page 472, if you're in the 8th grade book, the gray box tells us a preposition. Whoops, sorry, I'm moving things around. I don't want to move around. A prepositional phrase used as an adverb can modify a verb or a verbal. And here's the reminder: how, when, where, or why. A prepositional phrase used as an adverb can modify an adjective or an adverb, telling what degree, how much. Several prepositions can be used in succession. Remember, we talked about that. A prepositional phrase used as an adverb may contain a prepositional phrase used as an adjective, and then the infinitive or infinitive phrase can be used as an adverb. So I went over all of those. This is just your little review. I would encourage you maybe to take a picture of this or just copy this on a copier and put it in your notebook. It will remind you how those prepositional phrases can be used. Okay, let's take a look and make sure that we know how to do the diagramming. So prepositional phrases, and we are going to be looking at these more in the coming weeks. With blessings. God has blessed us with many rich blessings. With is the preposition. Blessings is the object of the preposition. So if you were in 3rd grade, you would know that this is the preposition and this is the object of the preposition. And so with goes on the preposition goes on the slanted line. The object of the preposition goes on the straight line. Any adjectives in between are going to go on the line below. Okay, let's take a look at another prepositional phrase. And you have to decide where they are going to drop. And so you will have Jesus walked. You could have a direct object out here. You could have multiple verbs. And you have to decide where those prepositional phrases are going to go. So in this case, the preposition or the prepositional phrases are all modifying the verb. The verb. So remember, we're in the adverb chapter. And so they are going to be modifying the verbs here, but they could be modifying an adjective. We'll probably see some of those as we continue to work through this. So Jesus walked tells us where, through the fields. We looked at this one earlier. So it tells us where, but it also tells us when, on the Sabbath. So as you start unpacking prepositional phrases in your sentence, make sure you locate them in the right place. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Now, here is the infinitive. And the infinitive is going to look a little bit different in the diagramming. Again, it's on that slanted line onto the straight line. But to know is going to kind of make a little arc right here. And if you know what an arc is, if you have ever studied circles and you pull out just one piece of the circle, that's an arc. Kind of makes a semicircle. So that semicircle is what to know is sitting on. Now the reason that you have to leave more space is in case there's a direct object. We study the Bible to know what? To know the truth. And so this one is different. If you put the to here and the know down here, you'd have it set up like a prepositional phrase, and we don't want it set up like a prepositional phrase. We want it set up as the infinitive. So that's one of the differences. All right, now here's another one. Jesus was displeased. And again, because we're talking about phrases with being adverbs, they're going to drop off the verb. But they can drop off of a direct object or the subject if they are telling us about those. So if I said something like Jesus in his wonderful robe, would drop off of him because it's describing him. So prepositional phrases can drop off of anywhere on the main line or a secondary phrase. So don't forget that. So the sentence, Jesus was displeased with the activities in the court of the temple. So let's see, how do we decide to diagram these? Well, what was Jesus displeased with? With the activities. So that's going to come right off the verb. That's, pretty easy to figure out. But where were those activities? Well, they were in the court. So this is telling us where. And then court of the temple is actually an adjective phrase modifying court, but they all drop off the same way. So with the activities is off the verb. But then in the court tells us when. And of the temple tells us more about where it was. Now, if you had put Jesus was displeased with the activities in the court of the temple, if you'd put them off of all of them off of was displeased, they wouldn't make sense. They have to be able to make sense by themselves. So let me read that. Jesus was displeased in the court. Sort of makes sense, but not really. We need more information. Jesus was displeased of the temple. Doesn't make sense at all. That's why they need to come down here one at a time and modify each other. And then down here is another infinitive. Jesus provided what? Jesus provided food, but Jesus provided enough food. This is an amount, so it's telling us how much. It's going to come off of here. It's like telling us beautiful food or rich food, so enough food. And then here is our infinitive, I can't even say it, to feed. And this is how you get that off of there. It's kind of hard sometimes to figure out how you draw the lines. Draw a straight line, right angle, and then you're slanted to the straight line. To feed what? To feed the multitude. So your book has some excellent examples of the different ways to diagram. So I want you to make sure that you look through those and make sure that you use them when you do your homework so that you don't get confused. And we will talk more about these in class. So thank you and have a wonderful afternoon.